We need to discuss your position at the center, Avery. My boss wouldn't meet my eyes, his gaze fixed on the stack of papers before him. My wife has raised concerns about the direction of our raptor rehabilitation program. Concerns? Our release rates are up 62% this year. We've saved species other centers couldn't. It's not about results. It's about approach. He cleared his throat. Marissa feels you're too rigid with protocols. 2. Controlling over who interacts with the animals. You mean because I wouldn't let her pose with the injured hawk for social media? Or when I stopped her from feeding cake to the barred owl? She's made a substantial donation. The board feels she deserves more input. So, what exactly are you saying? The knot in my chest tightened. We're restructuring. You'll be handling basic care duties. Cleaning, feeding. Marissa's cousin Jenny will take over the raptor program. Jenny? She's been volunteering for 3 months. She doesn't know the first thing about that. The decision's final. He slid a paper across the desk. Your new salary and position. I need your signature. I stared at the paper, blood rushing in my ears. A 40% pay cut. 4 years of building this program from nothing. Developing techniques that had saved countless birds of prey. All of it handed to someone whose qualification was being related to the woman who'd married wealth. What if I refuse? Then I'll accept your resignation, effective immediately. 2 weeks later, I watched helplessly as the golden eagle we'd spent months rehabilitating died under Jenny's care. She'd missed critical signs I would have caught instantly. As I stood over its magnificent body, something inside me broke, then hardened into resolve. I walked out that day, leaving behind everything I'd built. What I didn't know then was that I wasn't just walking away from a job. I was walking toward becoming someone that Marissa would one day regret crossing. If you're enjoying this story of betrayal and what comes next, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to hear how this unfolds. Trust me, what happens when she walks into my office thinking she's getting a job interview? Worth every second. My name is Avery Kincaid, and until that moment in my boss's office, I'd never considered myself particularly ambitious. Animals were my passion, not power. I'd grown up on the outskirts of Pinewood, a rural town surrounded by expansive forests and wetlands. As a child, I spent more time nursing injured sparrows back to health than playing with other kids. By 22, I'd earned my degree in wildlife biology and started as an entry-level caretaker at Wilderness Revival Center. Within 4 years, I'd developed such effective rehabilitation techniques for birds of prey that centers across the country began asking for my protocols. The director, Cameron, initially supported my work enthusiastically. We were making breakthroughs in raptor rehabilitation that were gaining national attention. The center's reputation soared, bringing in donations and grants. Then Marissa appeared at a fundraising gala. She wore a dress that cost more than my yearly salary and had the laugh of someone who'd never worried about paying rent. Cameron fell instantly, proposing after just 3 months. I was happy for him until she started showing up at the center, critiquing everything from our facilities to our methods. Wouldn't it be darling to have visitors bottle feed the fawns? She suggested one afternoon, ignoring my explanation about habituation risks. These animals aren't pets, I reminded her. Our goal is release, not socialization. Her smile remained, but her eyes changed. Of course, Avery, you're the expert. The trouble began in earnest after she contributed $200,000 with the stipulation that she would take an active role in center operations. Cameron was elated. The center needed the money. I tried to be accommodating, teaching her basics of wildlife care, but her interest wasn't in learning. It was in control. The incident with the red-tailed hawk became our breaking point. We'd spent weeks healing its fractured wing when Marissa brought friends to see her rehabilitation center. I want to hold it for a quick photo, she announced, reaching for the hawk's enclosure. I stepped between her and the cage. That's not possible. Stress could reverse weeks of progress. Don't be ridiculous. It'll only take a minute. No, I'm sorry, but absolutely not. Her smile disappeared. You work for this center. I fund this center. I work for these animals. 2 days later, I was demoted. The first month of cleaning cages instead of performing specialized care was humiliating. Staff who'd once sought my expertise now avoided eye contact. Jenny, with her 2-week crash course in raptor rehabilitation, began changing protocols I'd spent years developing. When the golden eagle died, I knew I couldn't stay. That night, I called Dr. Helen Lang, a veterinarian who'd referred injured wildlife to our center for years. I quit today, I told her, voice hollow. About time, she replied. Have you heard Elaine Parker is retiring next month? Selling her small rehab property out by Lakeside? Someone with your skills could transform that place. The idea planted itself like a seed. Could I? The property would need massive upgrades. I had some savings, but nowhere near enough. Yet the alternative, watching everything I'd built crumble under incompetent hands, was unbearable. 3 weeks later, I signed the papers on Elaine's 5-acre property, using every penny of my savings plus a small business loan. The facility was little more than an outdated house with a barn and some makeshift enclosures. The first night, I slept on the floor of what would become my office, surrounded by boxes of supplies and equipment I'd purchased secondhand. Morning revealed the enormity of what I'd undertaken. The enclosures needed rebuilding. The treatment room was decades out of date, and I was alone, without staff, regular funding, or even proper running water in the barn. I woke before dawn and worked until I couldn't stand. Every enclosure I rebuilt, every wall I painted, every protocol I wrote, I did it with Marissa's dismissive smile burned into my memory. 3 months in, living on instant noodles and determination, I got my first significant case, a bald eagle with lead poisoning, brought in by a park ranger who'd heard I worked miracles with raptors. The truth was less magical, just specialized knowledge and obsessive attention to detail. Wilderness Revival couldn't take it? I asked as we transferred the magnificent bird to a treatment space. They've had some problems recently, he replied carefully. State inspection found some concerns. Your name came up from several wildlife officers. I said nothing, but inside, a small flame of vindication flickered. The eagle survived, against odds. A local wildlife photographer documented its recovery and release, images that traveled far beyond our rural community. A small conservation magazine ran a feature on my innovative habitat-specific recovery spaces. Donations began trickling in, not Marissa-level money, but enough to hire an assistant, then a part-time veterinary technician. By month 6, we'd become the primary wildlife rehabilitation center for 3 counties. I hired a coordinator to handle incoming calls and paperwork. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving. That's when the email arrived. Avery, we have an interesting application, my coordinator said, stepping into my office. Someone with extensive wildlife center experience according to her resume. Marissa Peterson? I froze, staring at the printed resume she held out. There, in elegant typography, was the name of the woman who'd destroyed everything I'd built. The woman who'd had me demoted because I wouldn't let her endanger animals for social media content. Says here she was the Associate Director of Rehabilitation Programs at Wilderness Revival. My coordinator raised an eyebrow. Wasn't that your old place? I took the resume, scanning its contents with growing disbelief. According to this document, Marissa had overseen rehabilitation protocols, managed staff, and developed community education programs. Reality couldn't have been further from this fiction. What's the position she's applying for? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Operations manager. We did post that opening last week. The position would report directly to me, overseeing daily functions of the center. The perfect role for someone with actual experience, not someone who'd invented a fantasy career on paper. Why would she apply here? I murmured, more to myself than my coordinator. She must not know I own this place. Want me to reject it? We have other qualified candidates. So, I stared at the phone number on the resume, memories flooding back, the golden eagle that died needlessly, the humiliation of cleaning cages after years of specialized work, the nights spent sleeping on the floor of this very building while trying to create something new from nothing. A plan began forming in my mind. No, I said finally. Schedule an interview, but don't tell her who she'll be meeting with. My coordinator raised an eyebrow. You sure? Based on your reaction, there seems to be history there. History is putting it mildly, I said, handing back the resume. Schedule her for tomorrow afternoon if possible, and let's keep my ownership unlisted in any correspondence. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with questions. What had happened at Wilderness Revival since I'd left? Why would Marissa, a woman who'd used her husband's position and her own wealth to demote me, suddenly need employment? And at my center of all places, the ranger's comment about problems at my former workplace took on new significance. I'd been so focused on building my own center that I'd paid little attention to news about Wilderness Revival. A quick online search revealed concerning headlines: local wildlife center under investigation, state authorities question care standards at rehabilitation facility. I dug deeper, finding an article from just 3 weeks prior. Wilderness Revival Center director steps down amid controversy. There was Cameron's photo, looking haggard as he left the building. The article mentioned financial irregularities and substandard care protocols resulting in preventable animal deaths. No specific mention of Marissa, but reading between the lines, it wasn't hard to guess what had happened. They'd lost their funding. The center that had once been the crown jewel of regional wildlife rehabilitation was collapsing. And now Marissa, who'd never worked a day in wildlife care despite what her resume claimed, was desperate enough to apply at a small, rural facility she'd never heard of. The next morning, I dressed with unusual care. Not formally, we were a wildlife center, after all, but I chose my most professional field clothes and the jacket I reserved for donor meetings. My staff noticed. "Special visitor today?" asked Talia, my rehabilitation assistant, as she prepared medications for our current patients. "You could say that," I replied, checking my watch. 2 hours until the interview. I spent those hours in a strange state of anticipation, walking the grounds of what we now called Second Chance Wildlife Center. What had started as a rundown property was now something I felt genuine pride in. Our enclosures were thoughtfully designed for each species' recovery needs. The medical treatment room contained equipment I'd only dreamed of having at Wilderness Revival. We'd recently completed construction on specialized aquatic rehabilitation tanks for water birds. Everything here I'd built from nothing. After being stripped of my position and program at Wilderness Revival, I'd created something better. The knowledge gave me a steadiness I hadn't expected to feel. At precisely 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from our front desk. "Your appointment has arrived." I settled behind my desk, a simple but sturdy oak piece I'd refinished myself during those early sleepless nights, and nodded to my coordinator. "Send her in." The door opened, and there she was. Marissa Peterson looked different than when I'd last seen her. The designer clothes had been replaced with a reasonable but clearly new outfit purchased for interviews. Her usually perfect hair showed signs of more economical styling. But her expression, that was entirely new. Gone was the smug superiority, replaced with the tight smile of someone trying desperately to appear confident while feeling anything but. That expression shifted to shock the moment she saw me. "Avery?" She stopped mid-step, one foot literally hovering above the floor. "I didn't realize this was your place. Please, have a seat," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Professional, calm, nothing in my tone betrayed the complex emotions churning beneath. She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself into the chair, hands clutched tightly around her designer purse. "Likely a remnant from better days. Your resume claims extensive experience in wildlife rehabilitation management," I said, glancing down at the paper before me. "Tell me about that." She straightened, falling back on practiced poise. "Yes, well, at Wilderness Revival, I oversaw the rehabilitation programs, developing care protocols and managing staff schedules." "Interesting," I said, letting the word hang between us. "Which specific rehabilitation techniques did you implement for avian botulism cases?" Her eyes widened slightly. I delegated those technical decisions to staff with specialized training. And what's your approach to treating lead poisoning in bald eagles?" "That would depend on the severity of the case." She shifted in her seat. "What severity markers would you look for specifically?" She swallowed. "I'd consult with the veterinarian on the appropriate treatment path." For 15 excruciating minutes, I asked pointed technical questions that anyone with actual wildlife rehabilitation experience could answer. With each vague response, her composure cracked further. "What would you do?" I asked finally. "If a staff member disagreed with your approach to treating an injured animal?" "I would remind them who's in charge," she replied, a flash of the old Marissa emerging. "That's not the correct answer when someone else might have expertise you lack," I said evenly. She looked away, her facade crumbling entirely. "The center is failing," she admitted quietly. "Everyone says it's because you left. We've been blacklisted by several conservation groups." "What happened?" I asked, genuine curiosity mixing with my other emotions. "After you left, things fell apart slowly at first. The raptor program. Jenny couldn't handle it. More birds died. Then the deer began showing signs of stress-related illnesses. The state inspection found multiple violations. And Cameron? Her shoulders sagged. He tried to fix things, but our major donors pulled out after the inspection report went public. We invested our personal savings trying to keep it afloat, but she gestured helplessly. He resigned last month. We're selling our house. I let this sink in. The center that had pushed me out was collapsing. The couple who demoted me were facing financial ruin. The revenge fantasy I might have harbored 6 months ago had manifested without my lifting a finger. We need someone for basic facility maintenance and food preparation, I said after a long pause. Minimum wage, weekend shifts. You would report to my rehabilitation assistant, Talia, who's 20 years younger than you but has been rehabilitating wildlife since high school. Her face flushed deep red. That's absurd. I have administrative experience. In fundraising, perhaps, but our reputation is built on proper animal care, which begins with understanding every aspect, including the parts that aren't Instagram-worthy. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I don't need this. I didn't know this was your center, or I never would have applied. Why did you claim to have done my job on your resume? She froze, hand on the doorknob. I needed work. Cameron's reputation is ruined in the conservation community. My family won't help us. They never approved of him anyway. Do you have any idea what it's like to lose everything overnight? The irony of her question hung in the air between us. Actually, I said quietly, I do. She left without another word. That evening, as I made my rounds checking on our patients, I felt strangely hollow. The confrontation I'd anticipated for months hadn't brought the satisfaction I'd expected. Seeing Marissa humbled should have felt like victory. Instead, it left me contemplating the thin line between justice and vengeance. 3 days later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Is this Avery Kincaid? A man's voice asked when I answered. Speaking. This is Robert Winters, board chairman at Wilderness Revival Center. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. I'm calling because we're in a difficult position. Our center is at risk of permanent closure following recent challenges. I'm aware of the situation, I replied neutrally. Yes, well, your name has come up repeatedly as we've consulted with wildlife authorities about how to address our problems. Your rehabilitation techniques, particularly for raptors, were apparently exceptional. I said nothing, waiting. The board has removed Cameron Peterson as director, and we're seeking new leadership, someone with proven expertise and integrity. We'd like to discuss the possibility of you returning as director. My heart pounded in my chest. The position I'd never even dared dream of before my demotion was now being offered outright. Running Wilderness Revival would mean a larger facility, more resources, greater impact for the animals I cared about. What about the financial situation? I asked, keeping my voice steady. We've secured temporary emergency funding from the State Conservation Department, conditional upon new leadership and proven rehabilitation protocols. Your protocols, specifically. I thought of my small center. The struggles, the late nights, the pride of building something from nothing. Then I thought of Wilderness Revival's resources, the good that could be done there under proper leadership. I'd need to consider it carefully, I said. My current center. Of course, he interrupted. Take the weekend, but we need an answer by Monday if we're going to save the center. After ending the call, I sat in silence, watching through my office window as a rehabilitated Cooper's hawk tested its wings in our largest flight enclosure. Tomorrow, it would be released back into the wild, another success story. The offer churned in my mind as I completed my evening rounds, returned to Wilderness Revival as director, the ultimate professional vindication, everything I'd worked toward before Marissa entered the picture. As I checked on our newest patient, a young bobcat hit by a car, my phone buzzed with a text message. Cameron, heard the board reached out. Please consider their offer. I know I don't deserve your help after what happened, but the animals do. And Marissa is no longer involved, I promise. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding, my thoughts in turmoil. The decision ahead felt weighted with implications beyond my professional future. It was about who I wanted to be, someone defined by past injuries, or someone defined by moving forward. The next morning, I arrived early at Second Chance. The sun was just cresting the tree line, casting long shadows across our carefully constructed enclosures. In the quiet morning light, I walked the grounds, mentally cataloging everything we'd built in 6 short months. My phone rang again. Robert Winters. Apparently, he couldn't wait until Monday. Miss Kincaid, I apologize for calling on the weekend, but there's been a development. The state inspection team is giving us one final opportunity to demonstrate viability before they permanently revoke our rehabilitation license. They're visiting Wednesday. That's very soon, I replied. Yes, which is why we need your answer today. If you accept the director position, they'll take that into consideration. Your reputation carries significant weight. The pressure of the decision pressed down on me. Walking back to my office, I passed Talia, treating a barred owl we'd admitted yesterday. Morning, boss, she called cheerfully, his wings looking better already. I paused, watching her gentle, competent movements. 6 months ago, she'd been a talented but inexperienced volunteer. Now she could handle complex cases independently. I'd built not just a facility, but a team. As I continued toward my office, my coordinator waved me over to her desk. The family who brought in that fawn last month stopped by. They left this. She handed me a child's drawing of a deer with the wobbly handwritten words, "Thank you for saving her." I pinned the drawing to our already crowded bulletin board of similar tokens, tangible reminders of the community we'd built around Second Chance. Sitting at my desk, I stared at my phone, Cameron's text still unanswered, Robert Winters awaiting my call. The decision before me wasn't simply about career advancement or vindication. It was about what truly mattered to me and to the animals we served. I picked up the phone and dialed. "Mr. Winters, I've made my decision. I appreciate the offer," I told Mr. Winters, "but I'm declining the director position." Silence stretched across the line before he responded. "I don't understand. This is an extraordinary opportunity, the very center where you built your reputation. A center that chose to dismantle my program and demote me when it became inconvenient." I replied, surprised by the calm in my voice. "I've built something here that matters to me. We can match whatever salary you're making. Exceed it, likely. It's not about money. Then what is it about? Spite? Revenge against Cameron and Marissa? They're no longer involved. It's about integrity," I interrupted. "When animals were being mistreated, your board did nothing. When experienced staff raised concerns, you sided with donors over expertise. Why would I leave a center I built on proper principles to rescue one that abandoned them? Without your help, Wilderness Revival will close permanently." I paused, considering his words. The center's closure would mean dozens of animals in the region would have nowhere to go for rehabilitation. Despite everything, I couldn't let that happen. "I won't take the director position," I said finally, "but I have a counter-proposal. Second Chance Wildlife can absorb Wilderness Revival's rehabilitation program." "Absorb? I don't follow. We take over operations of your facility as a satellite location of Second Chance. Your board provides the property and remaining assets. We provide the expertise and management. Your center keeps its name for continuity with donors, but comes under our operational umbrella. That's unconventional. So is watching a once-respected wildlife center collapse because of poor management decisions. This preserves rehabilitation services in your area while ensuring proper protocols are followed. The board would need to vote. They have until Monday. After that, my offer expires." After ending the call, I sat back in my chair, heart racing despite my outwardly calm demeanor. Had I just turned down the position I'd once dreamed of? Yes. Had I then proposed essentially taking over the center that had pushed me out? Also, yes. My phone buzzed with a text from Cameron. The board chairman called me. "Is your counter-offer serious?" I replied simply, "Entirely." Throughout the weekend, I distracted myself with work, treating patients, revising care protocols, training volunteers. By Sunday evening, I'd nearly convinced myself the board would reject my proposal. Why would they hand operational control to the person they'd once demoted? Monday morning, my phone rang. As I was examining a recovering red fox, the board voted unanimously to accept your proposal. Robert Winters announced without preamble, "We're prepared to draw up the necessary legal agreements immediately." Within 2 weeks, Second Chance Wildlife Center had officially expanded to include what was now called Wilderness Revival Campus. I appointed Talia as the on-site manager, implementing our care protocols while I split my time between locations. We retained most of the staff, but instituted mandatory retraining in proper rehabilitation techniques. Word spread quickly through the wildlife conservation community. Rehabilitation centers in neighboring states reached out for guidance on our protocols. Grant applications that had been rejected when Wilderness Revival was under investigation were now approved with our management team listed. 3 months after the merger, I arrived at the Wilderness Revival campus for a routine visit. The transformation was remarkable. Animals receiving proper care, staff working with renewed purpose, volunteers eager to learn correct techniques. As I walked the grounds, I passed Cameron's former office, now converted to additional treatment space. Avery? A voice called from behind me. I turned to find Cameron standing awkwardly by the entrance. He looked thinner, his normally impeccable clothes slightly worn. Cameron, I didn't know you were visiting today. I'm not, officially. He gestured vaguely. I wanted to see how things were going. Things are going well. The rehabilitation program is back on track. He nodded, looking around at the center he'd once directed. The board told me about your management. Everyone says you've accomplished in 3 months what should have taken a year. We had a solid foundation to build on, I said diplomatically. Your staff just needed proper guidance. And Marissa's involvement was the problem. He stated it plainly, not as a question. I said nothing, letting the silence speak for itself. She's moving back east, he continued after a moment, living with her parents while the divorce finalizes. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? He gave a bitter laugh. After what she did to you? Marriage's ending is never something to celebrate, regardless of circumstances. He studied me, confusion evident in his expression. You could have demanded my permanent removal from the center as part of your takeover. You could have publicized what happened, how we treated you. Instead, I hear you've listed me as a founding contributor in grant applications. Revenge wasn't my goal, Cameron. Then what was? I considered his question carefully. Creating something that works, something that serves these animals properly, something built on expertise rather than ego. He looked away, unable to hold my gaze. The board mentioned you might consider bringing me back in a limited advisory capacity. Is that true? Yes. Your knowledge of the center's history and donor relationships could be valuable, as long as you understand that rehabilitation decisions stay with those qualified to make them. I understand, he hesitated. Thank you, Avery. Not many people would offer a second chance after what happened. I smiled slightly at his unintentional echo of my center's name. Second chances are literally what we do here. After he left, I continued my rounds, checking on each patient with the thoroughness that had become our trademark. In the raptor section, I paused before an enclosure housing a red-tailed hawk, the same species Marissa had once wanted to use as a photo prop. This particular hawk had been rescued after a territorial dispute with another raptor left it with a damaged wing. Initial assessments suggested it might never fly again, but under our care, it had defied expectations. Tomorrow, it would be released back into the wild, another success story that would have been impossible under the previous management. As I made notes on its final assessment, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local wildlife center gains national recognition for innovative rehabilitation techniques. The article highlighted Second Chance's expansion and our dramatic improvement of the struggling Wilderness Revival facility. 6 months ago, I'd slept on a cot in an unheated office, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Now I headed a thriving 2-campus wildlife rehabilitation organization that was setting standards across the state. The following week, I received an unexpected email from Marissa's lawyer, requesting permission to retrieve personal items she'd left at Wilderness Revival. I approved it without hesitation, instructing staff to provide whatever assistance she needed. On the designated day, I happened to be on site when she arrived. She stopped short upon seeing me, the confident facade completely gone. I didn't expect you to be here, she said quietly. Just checking on some patients, I replied. Staff will help you find your belongings. She nodded, then hesitated. I heard what you've done with the place. The rehabilitation statistics are impressive. That's what happens when animal welfare drives decisions. She looked around at the bustling center, and staff moving purposefully. Volunteers engaged in meaningful work, animals receiving proper care. You've built something remarkable, she admitted. Something I never could have. It wasn't about competing with you, Marissa. Wasn't it, even a little? A ghost of her former sharpness surfaced. You must have felt some satisfaction taking over the center after what happened. I considered her question honestly. The satisfaction comes from seeing these animals thrive, from knowing our work matters. That's a kind of success money can't buy and social status can't provide. She absorbed this, something shifting in her expression. I never understood what made you different. Why everyone respected you despite your lack of connections. It was never about me, I said simply. It was always about them. I gestured toward the recovery enclosures visible through the window. After collecting her things, Marissa paused at the door. What you've created here, it's what the center always should have been. As she walked away, I realized the true nature of my revenge wasn't in her humiliation or in taking over the center that had pushed me out. It was in building something so undeniably excellent that even those who had undervalued me were forced to recognize what they'd thrown away. 1 year to the day after my demotion, I stood watching as we released a bald eagle, our 100th successful raptor rehabilitation since the merger. As it soared into the open sky, wings strong and sure, I felt a sense of completion that no corner office or prestigious title could have provided. The ultimate revenge wasn't in tearing down what had hurt me. It was in rising so far above it that looking back no longer held any power. If you've been moved by Avery's journey from betrayal to triumph, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more stories of resilience and unexpected justice. Share in the comments what you would have done in Avery's position. Would you have taken over the center that pushed you out or built something entirely new? Your experiences with workplace betrayal might help others facing similar challenges find their own path forward.